Hello class, welcome back to more fairy tale genre analysis. Today we're going to be talking about painting with action verbs and also onomatopoeia and active voice because I think that's important in fairy tale writing and just in writing in general. So, first I have to introduce you to this concept that we're kind of pulling ideas out of. Harry Noden's image grammar. Harry Noden is a education guy. He studies literacy and multimodal literacy, and he describes the five basic brushstrokes of writing in his book Image Grammar. He talks about participle, absolutes, action verbs, positives, and adjectives out of order. But we're going to be focusing on action verb because that's the aspect of his image grammar idea that fairy tales utilize most. So, an action verb is a verb that expresses physical or mental action. This might feel kind of obvious. You might be like, wait, isn't that most verbs? Yeah, it is. But let's look at the difference through an example of what an action verb is versus a passive verb. So, action verb. Let's compare the following sentences. The dragon mauled Gerbert with a vicious tongue versus the dragon was talking to Gerbert really intensely. So, was talking is a state of being kind of verb, right? Uh, was talking, dragon is mad. This kind of language can often weaken our writing. And in a word of mouth spread tradition like fairy tale, you want to keep the plot moving along and you want it to be something that someone could read around a campfire, what you write. So you want to use this more active, action verb oriented writing style where, you know, someone isn't some way, they're doing something. Always have people doing something. And again, mold is an action verb. Okay. So now we're going to talk about onomatopoeia, and that's the formation of a word from a sound associated with what it is named. Example, like pow, bang, those kind of comic book noises you hear, or like ha 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 ha, things like that, where the way the word sounds is the word. So onomatopoeia is useful in some ways and in some contexts. It helps accent action. So if you really want to tell the reader that this person slammed the door, you could give a little bang, the door slammed, just to really reinforce how loud it was. It can be used for comedic or dramatic effect. Comedic's kind of obvious, like kerplunk, he gets hit by a hammer or something. It's just funny because of stuff like Roadrunner cartoons. But dramatic effect is interesting because play with the fact that readers don't know what the sound means. If they hear slam, they don't know what's slamming and they don't know who's doing the slamming in a written story. So that's a dramatic use of onomatopoeia that you could do in fairy tales pretty easily. Think about it. You want stakes in fairy tales. You got a good guy and a bad guy. And finally, it's good for visual modes of storytelling like graphic novels and animation. You'll see this graphic novel to the right, which I believe is just called um, Fairy Tales, the graphic novel, but it has the witch cackling, haha, in celebration after she poisons Snow White. And this kind of accentuates and accents the fact that she's evil. So again, onomatopoeia kind of characterized things and people. Now let's go to active voice. This is a sentence type where subject does action onto the object. Excuse me. This is a reinforcement of action verb. So let's compare these two sentences. Gerbert slayed the dragon versus the dragon was slayed by Gerbert. Where is Gerbert located? Because regardless, I would say he's the subject of what is happening. He's the one slaying the dragon. However, when we write it like the dragon was slayed by Gerbert, the dragon becomes the subject, Gerbert gets put to the sideline, and the writing style feels weaker and it kind of flows you forward less. The whole point of all these tools I'm mentioning is to keep essentially the river of your story moving forward. Like you want it to be a constant downstream of action and story progression. So Gerbert slayed the dragon. You have the person does something, we keep going on. Whereas the dragon was slayed by Gerbert, it sounds like we're reading a historical tome recounting the past. So you got to think about the order of uh, the subject. If the subject is what's being acted upon, the sentence feels weaker. So keeping those new tools in mind and the stuff we've talked about earlier, like allegory and extended metaphor, I want you guys to access this Padlet that I'm about to share with you. Yeah, right here. And as you can see, I already made a post on this Padlet, essentially breaking down those noticings we had earlier. And I want you to look at these noticings, and after learning about these specific tools, and learning about allegory, and learning about extended metaphor, I want you to choose one of the ones we've talked about, specific, literary terms, and I want you to talk about how it is a tool a writer can use for fairy tale writing. And the goal is to have as many literary tools as we can slap on here from your different classmates so that you can go back to this while revising your fairy tale. And let's talk about that and explain that. So let's do the quick weekly overview. You gotta do your discussion, feeling through art. You're supposed to do that before watching this video, but that's okay if you didn't. Essentially, just talk about a time art made you feel something, and that was to get you guys thinking about painting through art. Do this exit slip we just mentioned where you contribute to the tool set we're creating as a class with the Padlet. And finally, you have a composition revising the fairy tale. Now let me explain this assignment. So, revising the fairy tale, highlight each use of passive voice in your fairy tale. So the first step here is you want to look at sentences where you use passive voice and highlight them. That's it. In the draft I sent back to you with the feedback. Rewrite your fairy tale to utilize a more active voice after highlighting all your uses of passive. This doesn't mean transform every passive voice into active. If it works better passive, it works better passive. But this means I want you to orient your revision towards that. And any other things in your rubric I said need improvement upon. You might already have great active voice, but maybe you don't have enough of a clear metaphor. So maybe you could add a explicit moral like Charles Perrault. But regardless, this is your chance for final revision because when you submit this, the 50 points you get will be determined by the rubric instead of completion. However, you can keep resubmitting and rewriting until you hit 45 out of 50 if you want to work towards mastery. You just have to, communicate with me and we can work something out. But yeah, try to do those weekly assignments, get your stuff turned in, and have a great class period.